3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
And welcome to the show, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Giuseppe Ganci. I'm here on Facebook Live, not in studio, with my co-host Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
Hey, Giuseppe. Good to be here. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, good to be here. Welcome everyone to the show. Every Thursday we come to you live. And I said in studio because we were just talking about that. Right. The studio is finally open. And we just got a message this morning saying that our radio station where we do this show for the past 6 years in person was in the downtown east side at Vancouver Co-op Radio. Special shout out to them. Thank you. In the last 2 years, we've been doing this hybrid version live and then replayed on the radio. So if you're on the radio listening to us, you're 1 week behind schedule, but that might all change depending on our abilities to get back into the studio and doing the show live on the radio and on Facebook and all the others. So pretty cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we were talking, we created, this Facebook Live and, the logistics of bringing that aspect into the studio and being able to talk to guests, outside of the studio, still on the phone, and how that's all going to work. And we'll figure it out, though.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll figure it out. It's just, unbelievable. 2 years has gone by. So if your favorite restream, go to YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify. We're everywhere. Click subscribe on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And pretty excited to be in our 8th year of doing these shows, trying to talk about all the issues that relate to mental health and addiction recovery, and so forth. Amazing stuff came out of Alberta a couple of days ago. You can go onto their associate minister's Twitter page, and there's a conversation about Alberta is transforming their addiction healthcare and responses to their overdoses by a recovery-oriented response. Pretty amazing language, pretty amazing narrative in that report. I wish Health Canada would read it and take some lessons. I think it's a really bold move, and this isn't an anti-harm reduction document. It's how does all the pathways work together to increase better health. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, and if the rest of Canada. Here's a little pointer on that. We talked about this on our show. So for people that have listened to this show over the years, when we went to Ottawa on like March something 2019, I think it was, they have this report for the response to Canada's overdose crisis and all that. And the word recovery was almost nowhere in the document. Nowhere. I think it was like on the last half section, like it was buried in the document, and we pointed it out to them. We're like, recovery should be on the front page along with safe supply and everything else, but it wasn't. This document, the word recovery is like 225 times in the document. I did a search. I was just like, this is powerful. You're not going to talk about cancer without remission. And I don't know why Health Canada talks about addiction without recovery. We should hold these people accountable in Ottawa. Like that's the crisis. It's just unbelievable. I heard a comment the other day in a talk. We didn't stop heart disease by running around with shock paddles, shocking people's hearts back to good health, right? We invested in prevention, information, knowledge, better eating. That's how we got a handle on heart disease. We're not doing that with addiction. We're running around, and we need to run around. I'm not saying don't do this, so don't hate me, but we're just running around with naloxone kits, saving people's lives. And we need to do that. But like, where's the huge report on the lack of prevention in this country? That to me is what we need to fight on the streets about. We're lost in these arguments about what pathway's better, what pathway kills, what pathway saves life. It's all this noise. But the real fight that I wish, organizations all got on the same page with is prevention, prevention. So 20 years down the road, we're not still having these stupid fights about what pathway is better than what. Such a complex disease. I don't know what pathway is right. I don't care what research you throw at it. It's like people choose a pathway eventually, and they should all be available for free. So anyway, I'm excited about that report that came out of Alberta, and that's all I got right now. But I'm on this. When I heard that thing about the paddles, the shock paddles, I was like, yeah, makes total sense. So
well,
I'm
glad to hear you were excited for once by a report. That's
exactly. I also wanted to touch on, for those of you that listen to our show, Darren was, not on the show last week. Darren had some personal issues that happened, 2 issues, grief kind of hits all at the same time sometimes. And, just wanted to let the family, the Gaylor family and everyone else and your wife partner's family, our condolences from our guests and our listeners, and from the Last Door and New West Recovery. Darren had 2 losses, very close together.
Yeah. There's some patriarchs of the family, So yeah, hey, thanks for taking on the show. I don't think we've done a show just with one of us, right?
No.
We've been a team through this, and that was a good help. I mean, I was just reeling in the news of my grandfather passing, and like any sort of conversation was bringing up emotions, and not that I was afraid of doing it on the show, just not great for listeners.
Yeah.
To somebody crying their eyes out, but no, it's life. It's what we're it's what we're here for, and it's been an honor in hindsight, and being a person in recovery, to be able to be present through these times of loss, and being there for other family and my kids, and teaching them a healthy way of coping through these times that are sad, and there's no way around it. So
95 years old, great life.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope, I don't have anything wood in here. Like, I hope that I get to have that story, and 95 years and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks. Thoughts are with the family, and thanks for being on the show today. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery community, and grateful to be on 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. So we get to talk recovery with guests from around the world. Today's no different. Today we get to talk about an amazing topic that needs to be discussed more. And I'm going to let Darren do the intro while I get these people on air. Darren, who do we get to talk recovery with today?
We are talking recovery with 2 wonderful guests. I was going to say the same thing about a topic that I don't think gets discussed as much as it should. But so today we'll dedicate the hour of Talk Recovery to talk about FASD, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. And our guests are the producer and the host of the FASD Family Life podcast, Robbie Seale. Welcome to the show. And also Lauren Richardson with her personal story about living with FASD. Awesome combination. Thank you both for coming on the show today.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So let's start with the podcast, the all the W's, the who, what, when, where, why of FASD Family Life podcast. Take it away, Robbie.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, I'm happy to say that the FASD Family Life podcast is 1 year old. I just started the podcast last March, so I'm really excited about that. The why is because I am a parent raising 4 individuals with FASD, and it's hard work. And it's hard, lonely work. And I know the struggle is real, and so is success. And I wanted to share my education, my experience to help parents who are also raising kids with FASD.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the premise of our show, introducing, whether it's a very, talked about topic, and there's lots of information out there. Is it true that fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it needs more resources, more conversations? Like, is there a stigma around this topic? Like not many people have it, but we're mistaken because just not many people have been diagnosed. Like, what's that general sort of thought process in the public?
Well, yeah, I wonder if you guys even heard of FASD before we had this conversation. A lot of people hear about autism, for example, and thank God they do. But fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is 2.5 times more common than autism. And yet so few people think about it or know about it, including doctors, teachers, social workers. All those practitioners that are there to serve us and help us aren't even aware of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Which seems bananas, for lack of a better word. I mean, if it's that prevalent, that there would be more of a conversation. So what do you think that is? Is it the fact that there's not often a lot of information about the biological mom that has been drinking? Is it seen mostly in adoption? What's the general idea around
that's such an awesome question. Thank you so much. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is everywhere. It is a phenomenon that is around the world. It's really a health epidemic that's around the world. And let me just give you the brief definition of it. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a term used to describe a range of problems caused by drinking alcohol during pregnancy, including physical, mental, behavioral, and learning difficulties. These effects are often invisible, leaving children and adults with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder vulnerable and misunderstood. And so often we'll see people, not just in adoption and foster care, although there's a high rate there, but in the general community, you will see these children in early grades, maybe really struggling at school. Maybe it looks like ADHD, and then it looks like a learning disability, and then it looks like a conduct disorder. And really what has failed to happen so often is clinicians, doctors fail to ask the question, was there prenatal alcohol exposure? Let's talk about your pregnancy. What was your pregnancy like? Was there high stress? Was your partner drinking? Were you drinking? When, at what point in your pregnancy did you find out you were pregnant? Because we know that 60% of pregnancies are unplanned. Yeah. We know that 80% of women drink alcohol. And so if you don't know, if you have just a regular alcohol consumption pattern, I'm not even talking heavy drinkers, but if you don't find out you're pregnant till 8 weeks, 9 weeks along, well, that's 8 or 9 weeks of fetus development that there may be alcohol introduced. And we know that the alcohol goes right through the placenta and impacts baby. Oh. So if mom has 1 ounce, baby has 1 ounce. But how big is that fetus? And Lauren's shaking her head with me. How big is that fetus? Like centimeters big. And if mom has 1 ounce, baby has 1 ounce, and baby can't metabolize that. So then we have impact.
Never even thought about that. I mean, I guess being a man as well, I didn't even think about that. You don't know that you're pregnant and you're drinking and having wine and all that.
And maybe you've been at somebody's wedding, right? And you just had a few cocktails because you're at a wedding. So you had a wedding, and then you had a few cocktails, and then you had wine for the toast, and then maybe you had an after dinner drink. That's actually a binge, right? 3 to 4 drinks within a short period of time for a woman is a binge. That's very damaging for baby.
And this isn't even a conversation about like severe alcoholic mothers. I mean, and it brings up like, we've talked about it on the show, this sort of, stay-at-home mom type drinking, like it's very norm in society. And I don't know whether a clinician or a doctor that's treating a newly pregnant mother, like if they're saying absolutely no alcohol, like there's probably just a glass of wine won't hurt type of conversation, right? But you're saying it's as severe no matter where on the spectrum. There's potential for harm. To the fetus.
Of course. And yeah, binge drinking is a high risk. Of course, heavy drinking is an extremely high risk. And of course, but there's no safe amount. Canada FASD Research Network tells us that there is zero safe amount of alcohol during any time of pregnancy.
Wow,
It's
that's important
unbelievable.
information.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I always thought, FASD, alcoholic mother. I never thought just casual drinker. I wanted to bring in Lauren into the show as well. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the show. We have Lauren Richardson, a person. Is this how you describe yourself? A person living with fetal alcohol syndrome, or tell us about your story.
I do. I that's how I resonate with it. You have to remember when you're talking about somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome, you always put the person before the diagnosis. You always recognize the person before the diagnosis. It's no different than Down syndrome or any other disability. So to recognize the person first. I was diagnosed very, very late in life with this condition, partly because of having the cleft lip and cleft palate facial deformity that I was born with. So growing up, I didn't have any of the behavioral issues that can be associated with FASD, that sometimes can be associated with FASD. So I wasn't running out of classroom. I wasn't swearing at a teacher. I was a very compliant, I was a teacher's pet. Usually I was, seen and not heard in the classroom. And so going through the school system, I kind of blended into the normal ways of society. I was able to mimic my classmates in a lot of ways, and therefore I was seen and not heard in the classroom. So being diagnosed later in life was a shock, honestly. I was adopted and grew up in a neurotypical family. I have neurotypical parents and neurotypical siblings, and so being from a neurotypical family, being a neurodiverse person is very unique. It's a unique blend within our family, because sometimes I wonder if they understand me, and sometimes I wonder if I understand them correctly. And that's just the brain damage that happened to myself in utero. And getting the diagnosis later in life, I think, has saved me in a lot of ways, because I'm able to now be a public advocate for this and be able to speak openly and honestly about this condition, and hopefully help and raise awareness and help other children and adults and teens and tweens and that have been prenatally exposed to alcohol see that there is hope in life and that there is strength in having this disability. And
this question will be for both. We'll start with Lauren. So when did you decide to, because so many people will have a disorder or a health issue or addiction or something, and there's people that live with it. And then there's people that no, I'm going to make a social change. I'm going to be an advocate. So for both of you, was there a period, of this sucks to I'm going to change the world somehow? So Lauren, when did that happen for you and how?
So shortly after getting diagnosed at 27, I became very withdrawn because I didn't know anybody else who had this condition. So I became very withdrawn. I didn't really want to talk about it. I was very in denial. I was in denial of this condition for years, probably a good 2.5, 3 years, until I met other people, like a gentleman named Miles Himmelreich, who has fetal alcohol as well. And once I started meeting other people who have the same condition, I realized I could really use my voice here to make the change happen in this world. And I grew up watching, or reading about people like Dr. Martin Luther King and all these other, big social, people who made changes in this world. And back in 2018, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take a walk around my neighborhood, and I'm gonna look to see if there's any signages and if there's any things that are posted in the public place to recognize fetal alcohol. And so I took a walk around my town, and when I found that there was nothing, I thought, okay, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna talk to my mom, and I'm gonna say, I haven't found anything in Victoria here. So why is there nothing, and why we need to change that. We need to change that. So for me, it was like kind of probably 2 years after, or 3 years after getting diagnosed, after going through denial, and then realizing, no, I'm okay with this, and I'm gonna flip my disability to make it a success. And that was, started with the billboard ads and started with the bus ads, and so it took me about a few years to just kind of get my
That's awesome. And thanks for doing that. I mean, and it feels great. Darren, one more question, then it's your floor. So Robbie, you have 4 adopted children, FASD. We're trying to get one person to adopt one person. You adopted 4. So what triggered your life to want to adopt 4 children and start this journey? I mean, podcast is one thing, but 4 children, why?
That's a great question. And before I answer that, I just have to let you know, I'm a huge fan of Lauren. I just love her and I celebrate her, and she's the hero, and she gives me so much inspiration. Back to adoption. My gosh, I decided that I would build my family through adoption even before I was married. And what happened was I saw some really vulnerable kids on the streets in Edmonton. You guys are in Vancouver. I'm in Edmonton. We are even a smaller city than you guys are. And this was way back 3 lifetimes ago, in 1988 or something like that. And what I saw was some kids in the back alleys of downtown Edmonton prostituting. Like, I'm talking 9 and 10-year-olds prostituting. And I thought, oh my God, I had no idea. And why would that happen? And that began to change the trajectory of my life. First of all, I went to college. I changed my major and I went to college to be a child and youth care worker. So that would be working with kids in care, primarily in residential treatment centers, teens and younger children. And then as I moved along, I decided I would build my family through foster care and adoption. I figured I could be a mother to a child who needed a mother. I still didn't have a hot clue about FASD. I didn't know how that was going to impact my life. And then as I moved along, and I had a biological child. When she was 6, we decided we were ready then at that point to move into foster to adopt. And we adopted a 3-year-old. She came to us as a foster child and then was adopted 2 years later. And she had significant prenatal alcohol exposure, trauma, prenatal drug exposure. And there began the journey of learning about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which at the time, the social worker said, no, there's nothing to worry about. Her foster parents said, there's nothing to worry about. She's reached all her early milestones. Well, when she fell into addiction at 14 years old, I had something to worry about.
I'm just in awe that the 2 of you and what you're doing, and such a under the table conversation, just being, nope, we're going to bring this out to the open. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, we've had that conversation, with individuals on the show where it's like, it's literally them, within their geographical, area that like started it. It always takes just one, but somebody has to do it. And sometimes it's like, Lauren, you're describing the initial response to being diagnosed, and, there's shame and not, not wanting to wear it on your sleeve. And I think as a human being, anybody can relate to that. And, but that it just takes one, and who's going to do it, and now there's a community beginning, and that's where the true healing begins. Needless to say, there's the 27 years behind you, Lauren, of maybe this starts to make sense after the diagnosis. Maybe there's some relief in certain situations. But I mean, also there's some credit due, without sort of understanding myself and why I am the way I am. You still made it. You still, and I wonder what your personal opinion is on that. Like, do you think, I mean, maybe you wouldn't be an advocate per se, if you weren't given a diagnosis, but do you think would life be harder? Do you think, what's your opinion on that?
I've lived in the normal world, and I've lived in the disabled world, and there is quite a difference, because when you're normal but you're disabled, but nobody recognizes that you're different, because they look at me and they think, oh, she's neurotypical, then I'm fighting in a world that wasn't meant for me, right? Like I'm fighting for E8, like educational assistance stuff. My mom was fighting for an IEP. My mom was, fighting for extracurricular, extra educational, help in the education system. And the teachers are like, well, she can walk down the hallway and count to three, and so
Right.
it was very, they were blindsided. And so fighting for the right supports, was very difficult. But then after getting diagnosed, walking the path of the disabled path in terms of getting on PWD, persons with disabilities, financial structure, like out here in BC, we have PWD. I think it helped. I think my family opened up and saying, you know what, she's going to be okay. Like financially, she's going to be okay. Like, and there's other avenues. There's other, you have a gateway to getting more help. Yeah. They see somebody on PWD, you have a bit more access to more help. So it's a fine line you walk when you're neurotypical and disabled world, or neurotypical and disabled world, and vice versa. It's just a fine line that we walk.
It's still complex and complicated, and like most of the topics in this field are, but it becomes so simple, like there's that personal anguish of having to admit or accept what makes us different. And yet without that, we wouldn't be able to sort of begin to accept and understand and educate and then ultimately be there and create something for someone else that doesn't have to go through the same thing. And so it's so wonderful. And I wonder, so would it be fair to say you would advocate for, the earliest one could be diagnosed, the better for that individual and the family?
Yeah, I would absolutely advocate that, because I feel like fetuses don't have a voice. They don't have a voice, right?
Yeah.
And that kills me.
Yeah.
They don't have a voice. And it's happening right now as we sit here and talk. These, I hear the cries of the fetus cries, and I can't help.
It's so wonderful. It's sad, as you can relate to, but it's so wonderful that
fetuses have rights. Like I believe that fetuses have rights, and they have a right to a safe place without being invaded by alcohol. Like
on this, I wish I could give you a hug right now, Lauren. On this conversation, it's kind of like the elephant in the room, and is the alcohol industry, I mean, you go to the bathroom and you see a little sign that says, hey, if you're pregnant, don't drink. Right. Is that enough? Like, is that all you're gonna do? Is like, is there a sense within the community of FASD? Is there a sense of like the alcohol industry needs to be held accountable? There needs to be more money from the alcohol industry into FASD prevention. And I'm going to ask this question, and I hope it doesn't come out sideways. So there's three questions there really, but the third one is there a sense of like, hey mom, like why'd you do this to me? Like, is that something that goes on where you need a path of recovery from that? So first question is, what's the FASD community towards the alcohol industry? Like, what's the fight there? And is there a sense of like, mom, why did you drink while I was pregnant? And is there a sense of forgiveness that needs to happen? So anybody want to touch on those 2 points?
Go ahead, Robbie. You want?
I'll take some of those. First of all, there is a huge fight from the FASD community, those who are living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, those who are raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And this isn't just a baby or childhood disability. This is a lifelong disability. And so certainly there's a big push for prevention. And certainly you see those posters in the bars and in the washrooms, don't drink. If you're pregnant, don't drink. But really there's another campaign that says, even when you're beginning to think about becoming pregnant, don't drink. And a campaign that says, hey, husbands, partners, you can support the women having a safer pregnancy by not drinking too. So there's lots of those different things. FASD, which is the Canadian FASD Research Network, is really pushing for the federal government to come forward with a national initiative, a national strategy, so we can really get some money and some political oomph behind this movement. Because really, I think last year's budget, I think the Canadian federal government gave $1.5 million to CanFASD. Like, what's that? $1.5 million. We need a lot more money to fund research and to fund programs, because parents who are raising children with this disability are struggling. Some of them just don't know where to turn, because this is such a difficult, challenging disability. Because so often our kids look absolutely, like Lauren said, neurotypical. They look like everything. And maybe they have an ADHD diagnosis, but guess what? That ADHD med isn't touching it. The ADHD strategies aren't working. And the more we try with those typical strategies, the worse things get at home. And then people with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder have 93% of whom will go on to develop other mental health disorders. So this becomes very, very complex. Often there's ADHD, often there's autism along with it, or misdiagnosis of autism, and then there's mental health challenges. So we really need the federal government to step up. Now, of course, we need the partnership of the alcohol industry to label their products. Label their products that this is dangerous, no alcohol during pregnancy. And then we need to get in front of the medical staff, or really into the universities where these doctors, nurses, psychologists, teachers are all being educated, and get in front of them to say FASD is a real thing. And the prevalence rate in Canada is 4%. That's 1 in every 25. That's 1 in every classroom. Wow. And then for those people who are working in the addictions or recovery industry like you all are, the rate is significantly higher.
It's shocking that, when you start throwing numbers and, it's something that,
you and I know people. You and I both know people with FASD, even if you don't know it. We both know people. If you look around,
and there's a chance that that person doesn't know it.
Yes.
Which is right. We have this conversation with addiction, denial. It's like we hit an age, unless our parents sort of, found the answer and got us into something, like it almost becomes this, I don't want to know. And I don't want to have to deal with this. And Lauren's a perfect example of that. So what, obviously, if the mother is admitting to drinking, whether problematically or casually or whatever, is that a question? Because that's none of our business. That's maybe how the doctor, takes a stand.
But what if we could normalize? What if we can normalize those conversations, right? Like we all know now, all women know not to smoke during pregnancy. We all know not to eat soft cheese. We all know not to go in a hot tub. Like we all know this stuff because we've taken the stigma out of it. But I think the alcohol industry is so powerful that they quiet down these conversations. And
it's just a little bit of champagne. That's all it is. Just a little bit of champagne.
At the reveal party, at the gender reveal party, let's have some champagne.
Oh yeah, I've seen that so many times. So I want to go back to the second point of that question. Lauren, your 4 adopted kids, Robbie, is there a sense of blame to the parent, and so this conversation is how, Lauren, do you still blame? Do you blame? Did you blame?
I'm adopted, and so I don't have any connection with my birth mother. So ultimately, I don't forgive her, and I never will. And that's just my part of my story. Not everybody who has this condition necessarily needs to forgive their mother. I think Because, but that's just me. I have no connection with her, so I don't have, I don't have that maternal connection with her. Like, I don't have that connection with her. So I will never forgive her for what she's done, but I don't love her any less. Than
I love
if
that,
knew her.
Lauren. Lauren, you
Mhm.
just show exactly how complicated it is. I love that.
It's, I mean, how do you admit that a mother could abuse an innocent child in utero and then abandon her child? Like, I was abandoned at birth, and so there's a lot of why I'm crying is not because of the circumstances. There's just a lot of trauma that can come with that, and it's unpacking the trauma. And I understand why she probably couldn't take care of me, or but I'll never have that answer. I'll never get that answer because I don't know who she is. I have no connection to her other than DNA, really. But she's not on my Facebook. I don't get a Christmas card, birthday, and there's nothing there. So do I forgive her? No, I don't. But it doesn't mean that I don't love her and I don't think about her, and I wish she was here.
Lauren, after the show, I hope you have an opportunity to talk to your support group and have that conversation and just get to a place of having a good Thursday and so forth. We definitely want to make sure that you're okay. And if you need anything, just you got Jordan's email and just give us a call. And we got lots of support tools here as well. And really want to like just let you know you just a hug for you, and we're acknowledging we don't want to put you in a place of total sadness. Okay, so let's get there. And you're doing amazing stuff. You got all of this amazing, you know what I mean? Like, having a voice has challenges because you have to talk about it, right? And you're just making it easier for hopefully a mom and a daughter and a son or somebody's listening with the same issues, but they're not talking about it. And I truly believe talking about it relieves every little bit of all that anxiety and everything that goes in it. But definitely don't do it alone. Do it with a team of people and so forth. But that's it. I mean, even in addiction, we've had moms on our show talk about, I love my son, but when they were in addiction, I hated them, but I always loved him. I just didn't like him was one of the quotes. I didn't like my son, but I loved my son. And I think it's having that understanding, because when people are new to the asking for help phase, they don't know how to separate the two, and that's where you get lost. And we always need to love each other, but we don't have to like everybody, and sometimes we feel like we have to, and it's not humanly possible. But to love, that is, I truly believe that. And there's a lot of people I don't like, but I try to love everybody. But before I came into this realm of recovery, I honestly hated people, but it wasn't real. It was just my addiction. In my life, it was addiction. So yeah, that's what we do on Talk Recovery Radio. We try to talk about issues that people don't talk about, and we have feelings about it, and we have tears on our show, and we have laughter on our show, and this is real stuff. And I'm just glad that we're talking about it. I don't know, I have two 4-year-olds that I'm Uncle G to, and I get that beauty, where I have these kids growing up, and and I'm not married, I don't have a partner, so I won't have my own family. They are my family, and all that. So to have the courage to adopt 4 children and bring all this stuff into my household, is something that needs to be applauded. And the federal government giving 1.5 million is, you're right, it's crumbs. What's it going to do to fix anything? So as a society, people listening, what do you need us to do? And what can we do?
I think what we need you to do is to be, if you've heard us talk about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder today, now help us raise awareness. Help us raise awareness by getting on social media and talking about FASD, or finding it and liking it and commenting it there. If you want to listen to my podcast, FASD Family Life, then you can like and share that too. That helps raise awareness. You can write to your government representatives and say, hey, we need to do more for people living with this disability. This is a neurodevelopmental disability and it needs support. That's what we need to do. Also, how about as a society, we just take a pause and we ask ourselves, what is my relationship with alcohol?
Right.
And let's ask that question, like you were mentioning earlier, Darren, about this, all the memes and all the comments and social media, mom life and wine moms and this kind of stuff. Like, is parenting really so hard that we need to be drinking alcohol to get through the day? Is that really what's happening? Or are we making a joke of it? But the question is, what are we doing to our bodies? We know that alcohol is also a carcinogenic. We're actually introducing the risk of cancer into our lives by calming down our feelings with mothering and the hard work of being a parent. But also, what are we modeling in terms of stress management to our kids? We know that the amount, let's say we as a parent drink, our kids will drink more than that. Like, that's statistically borne out too. So what are we doing? What's the example we're setting? And then if it's a woman of childbearing years, and that's, up to 50 years old, and for some women, if you're drinking and you have an accidental pregnancy and 60% of pregnancies are unplanned, you could have a child impacted by prenatal alcohol, and it's not just the 18-year-olds, it's up to, a 50-year-old, like you think you're in perimenopause and you think you can't get pregnant and you're enjoying your wine with your friends and whammo, you're pregnant. And now you've got to consider, oh my gosh, what was my relationship with alcohol? Have I impacted? And then that's where Lauren's grief comes into those fetuses who don't have a voice.
It's, you bring up a very sort of intrinsic question to oneself, because that's, I think, what it takes. Whether it's, just casually drinking or, fiercely addicted, there is right throughout a level of denial. Like, it's, even the person who's ended up homeless on the street is still saying, well, it's not harming anybody else, and that's what, the mom newly pregnant is saying too, that the doctor didn't say anything to her. Well, it's not harming anything. It's just one or two. And that is what we all need to do as individuals, even as with the partner of the pregnant mom, like, am I helping? Am I helping? Am I just taking it for granted that my drinking can't affect, our fetus? So I'll just kick back and I'll have two for you, and that there's a very, Lauren, you kicked into something there. Did I say something?
Yeah, there has been studies, and I don't really know specific, but there has been studies done, I believe, where men who have been drinking can not cause fetal alcohol, but it can, it changes the alcohols in your sperm, and that can contribute to FASD. If you go to the bar and you go out all night and you come home and have sex with your partner, but you have alcohol, that changes your sperm, and that can contribute to FASD. I believe. Don't quote me, but I think it has been studies. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Studies aren't clear, but it's true that men have a responsibility in that quality of the sperm. Absolutely. If they're drinking, if they're smoking, if they're using cannabis, if they're using drugs, all of that impacts what the DNA and the epigenetics and the quality of the sperm that they're passing on to their young person, to their future child, right? And then also the studies have been cited where we know that men's drinking impacts women's drinking. If she's trying to stop, it's anything. If you're trying to stop coffee and your partner's drinking coffee and it's really hard to stop drinking coffee, well, how much more so if you're using alcohol recreationally or as a coping mechanism for stress? And if your partner's drinking, and it's going to be harder for you to drink. And also too, sometimes within family systems, there's a shame if you stop drinking, this is our family norm. What, are you better than me now that you don't drink? Like, what the heck is going on? And I drank with you and you turned out fine.
Yeah, that's a very common conversation. I smoked, I drank, it's just why take the chance though? I want to touch on another subject though before we run out of time here. We've talked a lot about the child I want to just talk a little bit about the mom, and what support services are there for, I'm a mom, and I have a child with FASD. The mom's in the life, right? And obviously there's a lack of support for children with FASD. I imagine there's a lack of support for moms who had a child with FASD. Where's their support, and what can a mom do? She's had a child, she has a child, and the child's FASD. What support groups are out there for the mom? Podcast, yes. What can a mom do? And the mom feels horrible. Like, how do we help the mom?
Absolutely. First of all my love goes out to that mom. All my love goes out to that mom. If you have had a baby and now you recognize, oh my gosh, I think I drank when I was pregnant, please, we are not judging you. There could be some really big feelings, but we're not judging you. We know that you did not harm your baby intentionally. We know that. And so first of all, love to you. Second of all, you can reach out and find support in your community for women who perhaps have had a child with FASD, who are struggling with alcohol use themselves or substance use themselves and are at risk of having a child with FASD. There is support for you. One of the agencies I can recommend to you in BC is FSI, the Family Support Institute, and they have wonderful supports there. If you're curious, and support groups there as well. There's an FASD family hangout that happens every Thursday night online, and I was just told the time and I forget, but that's okay. You can look that up, FSI, FASD Family Hangout. That's one. If you're curious about more particular services or maybe diagnostics, you can go to the Asante Center. The Asante Center has an FASD clinic, and that's where they can do diagnosis for people with FASD.
How long is the wait to get a diagnosis? Do you know?
I don't know. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, and in Edmonton, Alberta, the diagnostic clinic, think about this too. Think about how sad this is. There is one diagnostic clinic in all of Edmonton. We have more than 1 million people,
Wow.
% of whom have FASD, and we have one clinic. How many people do you think they can see a year? Not as many as needed, right? But go ahead.
I think there is a wait list here in BC, and I know that it could be anywhere from maybe 2 years, 2-3 years, depending on circumstances. You literally have to be on fire in order to get help and services, and if you're not on fire, they pat you on your head and say wait in line.
I mean,
this is the nastiness of every single conversation we've had.
Literally, that's the quote. Yeah,
addiction.
Yeah, if you're 13 smoking weed, no problem. If you're in psychosis, but when you finally end up homeless on the streets, then we'll spend hundreds of dollars a day. Right.
Absolutely.
You don't even want to get me going. Actually, I'm not gonna go there. Yeah.
Me too, because I've had a kid there. Yeah. But so what there is there are support groups online too. Like you can look at Facebook and you can find support groups on Facebook for parents raising children with FASD. We're there. Also nationally, I keep referencing CanFASD, but they are there, canfasd.ca, and there's online free training, and there's papers to read and resources available there. And then also if you just kind of Google FASD and your city, something will come up for you too.
Thank you.
I hope. And there's me. You can reach out to me too at FASD Family Life.
I was just going to say and ask that question. That you guys yourselves are just amazing resources. Not so much for it doesn't need to be statistics and that type of information, but just like of an understanding, of a relatability of that is everything. Sometimes for a confused parent. I just wanted to bring up, before we end our show, which is, related to both of you, is the adoptive parent. That, I mean, it's an amazing mindset. It's an amazing position, and I think maybe they don't get enough credit. Because under the circumstances, they're adopting with maybe little to no information of the background, They do their best. They provide the most that they can, and sometimes because of these underlying undiagnosed, unknown situations that, you know, now they're taking the brunt of parenting. And I've worked with a lot, you know, a few adopted, you know, kids that, oh, they just gave their parents such a hard time, you know, the adoptive parents, and because, well, that's who they have to give a hard time to. You know, I think parenting comes with a little bit of that. But, you know, the parent doesn't know that. I mean, the parent's not going to go into a lab and say, run every single test on this child so that I know what I'm getting into.
I tried that. They don't have a lab test. I tried that.
That doesn't exist yet.
Doesn't exist.
Only for our cars, hey? That's crazy.
For our...
So, you know, here it is. Your question is about adoption. Who, what, where, when, why do we adopt? There's lots of different reasons. I adopted because I wanted to make a difference in a child's life.
Yeah, I think that's
really quite different. But I have friends, my dearest friends have all adopted from a place of infertility or unable to have biological children. So then they adopted privately. So I adopted from foster care. So I had an awareness that my kids would have trauma and my kids would have exposure. I didn't have a hot clue what that meant, but I had at least a little bit of awareness. My friends were promised healthy babies.
Right.
They got the short end of the stick. They really did. They got children with profound disabilities, profound FASD and mental health challenges, and they struggled from the beginning, and their adoption agencies did not stand with them, did not educate them, and these parents were floundering. Okay. And they've been involved in mental health services for their little children for a long time, because there's that stigma about birth moms saying, yeah, you know, I did drink before I knew. But if we could just love on birth mom enough to say, you know what, whatever you tell us, we can love on you, and that helps us prepare the way for your child as well.
Right.
Yeah, if you can be in contact with birth.
Well, in this case, these are private agencies. So in this case, the women chose adoption for their lives, and they chose adoption for their children for whatever their reasons were, and still, you know, said that they didn't drink. And that's because of stigma and shame. But if we could somehow break that down and say, you know, you didn't know what you didn't know, and we love you, and let us help you in providing the best life possible for your child.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to, you know, there's obviously some difficulty in the understanding and acceptance with your birth mom. What is it? What's the feeling towards your adoptive parents? Or parents, right? I mean,
they are just angels. I just love them. You know, I've never been angry with them at all. Like I mean, they're all I ever knew, right? And so like,
not even when you were a teenager. I remember being.
Honestly, like I'll be honest with you. I've been clean and sober for 35 years. Clean and sober. My last drink was in the hands of my birth mother. So my mother knew that I wasn't going out to parties, and my mother knew, like I put my focus into education, and I didn't go partying. Because I struggle with anxiety a lot. Anxiety is can be a part of FASD. So being in party situations where everybody's out of control and you're the only sober one, and it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. And being sober all your life, you have different feelings. I have major anxiety. Nobody really knows that, but I do. I have struggled with a lot of anxiety. And so being in social situations just wasn't for me. So going to the bar was not my thing. Going to the you know, the house parties is not my thing. I focus more on getting an education and you know, and that kind of thing. My younger sister had more of the behavioral issues in the family, and I'll be honest with you, but I learned from my younger sister and my older sister what not to do in the family. So I'm not saying I was a golden child, but I'm just saying I knew what not to do. And so, you know, they went off and partied and they had a good time, and that was their thing. But I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna put my nose in a book and educate myself.
It's amazing to hear. I mean, you know, I say this lightheartedly, like, you had more of your shit together than I did. You know, like, I mean, it's amazing to hear that, like, even though it's having an effect, whether it's known or unknown, that it almost, it didn't, like, you still maintain some direction and some focus. And I just think now with an understanding and a name to it, and like you say, not associating it to that's who you are now. You know, it's like understanding why I can't, you know, write legibly with my right hand because I'm actually left-handed. Like,
Are you left-handed?
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's the.
But, you know, Darren, what we know is that, like, in terms of protective factors for people who have been prenatally exposed to alcohol, is number one is a stable, loving family life. That is very protective. Now, of course, if you're born into a family and there's addiction in the family, there's love, but it's not stable.
Right.
There's a lot of chaos there. That does further trauma to that developing brain. So that's not a protective factor. So we need stable, loving, informed families. That means those families need FASD training. And that's what they need, because they have to understand that all that typical parenting style that worked with all their other kids will not work with this child who has prenatal exposure. We need a totally different way of parenting, and that's called brain-based parenting. The other thing we need to understand what the heck is going on is we need a diagnosis, because why would we even consider another way of parenting if you don't have a diagnosis? And in some places in Canada, it's extremely hard to get a diagnosis.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, to think you'd have to wait years to get a diagnosis is just shows, like you said earlier, Lauren, you know, unless you're on fire, the healthcare system doesn't really, you know, show up for you.
And the cost
And the cost. Oh, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it. In some places, yeah.
Yeah, some places, and it's like expensive. Like a diagnosis cost of diagnosis could be anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000-$30,000.
Unbelievable.
Well, it depends on if that's under a child. Like if it's a child, it might be free if it's an adult. And also think about it this way. What happens if you have a child who has diabetes and you never get that child assessed and diagnosed, and then you carry on parenting as you always do? What's going to happen? Is that child going to have good long-term health outcomes? No. It's the same for a person with FASD. They have a physical disability. It's in their brain. It's a physical disability. And without a diagnosis and a long-term treatment plan, you will not have good health outcomes. But if you have a diagnosis and good treatment, you can have a very positive outcome in your life.
What we started the show off today during Darren and I's chat is Canada needs to do more of prevention and preventing harm. We're stuck on this reducing harm. We forgot about preventing harm, and it goes even in this field of conversation as well. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We could go on a little longer, but we're on the clock, and it's time to move into the next show. I appreciate your time, Robbie. One more time, where's your website, and how can people find your podcast?
My podcast is FASD Family Life, and it is everywhere you listen to podcasts. So iHeartRadio, iTunes, I'm everywhere. And you can email me at fasdfamilylife@gmail.com.
Lauren, thanks for being on the show. Best wishes for you and your journey and your advocacy, and keep hashtagging FASD so more people talk about it. Darren, it's always good to see you. We'll see you next Thursday, Darren. And thank you for listening. Talk Recovery Radio, brought to you by New West Recovery. Shout out to Vancouver Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM. Bye, everyone. See you next Thursday.
Guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.